All right, it's 5:30, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the work session meeting for City Council Minnetrista, May 20th, 2024. We have a number of items on our agenda. We're going to talk about the water treatment plant timeline, water treatment plant infrastructure upsizing project update, discuss city code, blah, 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 absentee ballot counting board, the Tuxedo boat launch dock discussion, construction parking ordinance, Hunter's Crest 5th edition, Outlaw D, and then council chambers IT equipment. So we have 8 things, so we're going to get started right away. Who's going to take the water treatment plant timeline discussion?
I can do that.
Jasper?
Yes.
Oh, do I need to do introductions so we know who's all here?
I mean,
all right, so present this evening, myself, Lisa Whalen, the mayor. Council members present are Kathleen Refkin, Ann McGregor, Peter Vickery, Claudia Lacey. Staff present is Director of Gary Peters, Ali Paulfus, and Meyerhoff. Also our city engineer, Aaron Vollmer. Thank you. I got the Aaron right. Jasper Krugel, Brian Grimm, David Abel, Sarah Sansala, and our Chief of Police, Paul Falls. So with that, water treatment plant, Jasper.
yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'll try to be succinct in some of the conversations here, but this one might take a little bit of conversation to kind of work through. But essentially the intent of this is to talk about funding mechanisms for the water treatment plant that we've talked about quite a bit over the last year or longer. Talk about the different pros and cons of each. Talk about the timelines of each, and kind of go from there. I will add, we've been going after outside funding. I think if everybody is following the state legislature, they convened, or they ended their session yesterday without passing a bonding bill. So we won't see any money this year with that. We can always apply next year. We'd have to get new bills written, I think, for that session. But depending on our representatives, we would pursue that. Federally, we did make the cut for Dean Phillips and Amy Klobuchar's short list of projects. They each get to pick 15. So we did make the short list on that. Now, no guarantees. I think Dean Phillips is recommending $3 million for us. Amy Klobuchar isn't recommending anything. I think we requested $5 million total. So I don't know if they'll reconcile that if it gets farther along. So that's in the mix too. That's kind of on the PFA path, if I will, to talk about that. But it does take some time for that federal money to be procured or secured. So what we have in front of you is kind of two different.
Just real quick. So the federal dollars are not tied to PFA funding, and correct.
They are not.
Okay, and we would probably find out or won't find out if we get the federal funding until December-ish, maybe even January, somewhere November, December, January time frame. So, okay, that's all. Thanks.
Correct. But there are stipulations that I believe the EPA on how you need to bid and do those things that take time too. So, and there are federal requirements similar to PFA. So there are some of those that if we would accept those monies, it would be essentially following the PFA rules, maybe a few more rules. So, so what you see in your packet is kind of a breakdown. Yeah, there's a nice infographic on here kind of breaking down the two different options, kind of the cost impacts of both. Obviously, the big glaring number is the percentage between the PFA and the bond. We're making some assumptions that 2.1% PFA is the current right now. They kind of follow the market a little bit. If there's a rate cut, it could go down. But that's essentially what would happen with our bond rate at 3.75 right now. So, for this exercise, looking at them, what they are right now is probably pretty accurate within, a little bit, 1/10 of a point or something like that. But you can see the difference. Major difference is the percentage difference between the two, and that's the big number, the $3.75 million, $76 million over the 20-year life of the plant or the bond. There's a couple other things. PFA, you only pay interest on what you draw, so those things are good. But I will say there's no guarantee that we would get PFA. 2022, PFA was not funded. So some of the cities that, were eligible, ended up having to get some exemptions, do some funny financing to kind of gap financing, things like that, to actually get it to work. So really, the timelines, as you can see, I don't know, Brian, if you can pull up that. Aaron had put together a timeline that was requested from somebody to kind of talk about the differences. One of the big things that popped out at me when Aaron sent this was the construction timeline being longer than what I expected, at 2.5 years. That I would say is a conservative number. Procurement of the items that go into the treatment plant are there's kind of a contingency on there. We won't know until we actually would bid it. So the real number, I would say, look at the design to the bidding, and then construction at the earliest could start in 2025 if we would go with the traditional route. But as you can see, these construction timelines for substantial completion get out fairly far, 27, maybe even end of 28, 29. So there's risks with waiting, right? I think everybody's familiar with the water supply plan and the firm capacity being above what our max daily number is. And every year we go out past that gap gets a little bit bigger. Now that's if our number one producing well fails, which is well number 7, we would have trouble meeting the demand in the summer. That would be the case right now too. If 7 would fail today or this middle of the summer, we would run into issues, and we'd likely have to go down the path of phase 2 or probably phase 3 of the watering restrictions.
Why is construction? This is just a question.
Yeah.
This is the first I've seen this. You sent to me earlier today. I swear the last go around, his construction timelines
About 18
increased
months.
so much.
Yeah.
Last time around, it was 12, 18
It was about 18 months.
And this would be what, 30 months?
Another, this is,
Yeah, and that just seems a little.
Seems a bit long.
Overly conservative. Overly.
right.
I know. Seems too long to me. I guess I'm just gonna go on the record and state that.
I thought, I looked at this and I said, I know for sure we did the other treatment plants in about 18 months. And so this seems really long to me.
Yeah, and I can speak for Aaron a little bit. He said 1.5 years to 2 years probably, but building in about a 6-month window for procurement contingency. So you're absolutely right. The 18-month is probably the best case scenario. 2 years probably what it will be. 2.5 is the conservative estimate.
Okay.
If we were to do the bonding, do we still do the PFA too?
We would not.
No.
Nope.
It's one or the other, yeah.
It's one or the other.
You
You
pick a
can
course,
only
pick
pick
one.
You can't get any other money.
Correct. Yeah, you can't start a project for PFA before you actually get PFA approval. We tried. We kind of posed the question of doing some gap financing of, because of the timing of our wells. Say, hey, can we maybe start this project now and then apply for PFA in 2025 for funding in 2026? But that would open up a whole different precedent for PFA, and everybody would want to do that at that point. So,
The only,
How variable is the PFA funding? It sounds like it's a real Russian roulette. Is it usually funded, or was last year kind of extraordinary?
it's usually funded.
well, it's usually funded if it's not connected to your growth. So in other words, if you need a project if you have to do a project because you're growing, there's probably it's less likely that you're going to get funding. If you need the project, now what we're trying to do here is we're going to be doing the wells, and then we're going to test the water in the wells, and it's probably going to be high manganese and iron. So then we'd go to PFA and say, well, it's not our growth that is driving this, it's the water quality that's driving it. Okay? So just so you know, there's two different things. The wells don't qualify because the wells are because of our growth. So we know those don't qualify. So
So just the treatment plant.
it's the treatment plant that we're thinking will qualify because we're pretty sure that the manganese, because of the test wells that we did, that the manganese is going to be too high. It won't meet Minnesota health standards.
Has there been any movement with St. Bonnie about buying water? That seems like that'd be really important to get that in place.
Yeah, so I can answer that. We're working on that. The meter that it's set up for the interconnect for one of them. I think, Gary, how many interconnects do we have with St. Bonnie? Is there three? Three. So one of them with a project last year at St. Bonnie, we'll get that meter. We kind of agreed to that. But the meter was back ordered until June or July of this summer. So at that point, we'll have an agreement between St. Bonnie and Minnetrista for emergency use only. If we want to actually purchase water from them, that'll be a separate agreement if we'd ever want to do that. And they may or may not want to sell us water or even be able to, depending on how much they need.
Well, they're under capacity right now, so they would have capacity. We've already looked into that.
They would, but it's,
Yeah.
They wanted ridiculous rates, though.
Right.
they did want some higher rates
Right.
than what we charge.
Right.
So
But if they were
for the emergency use, just back and forth. So that could be an option. We'd have to negotiate and get that agreement finalized.
What would qualify as emergency use? Would that, I
Fire.
assume, fire?
fire,
Fire,
Drinking water? Would that-
yep, maintenance. If one of our towers gets too low, then if there's some capacity available on both sides, then we would allow that and open that up. And we've done that from time to time in the past.
And the emergency cost is reasonable?
Oh, so right now there is nothing in place. It's just we give them a little water, they give us a little water. It kind of works out. What the meter will do is allow us to kind of see what the flow is between the two cities, and then the dollar amount that's agreed to in the emergency agreement is what we would pay on a quarterly or annual basis, one way or the other. We don't really know what it is. We think it's probably pretty close at this point, but we just don't know. But it'll allow us in the future to meter it one way or the other. If we were to buy water from them, we could then meter it, which we don't have that capability right now.
The other thing, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I just have a quick question. Risk of complaints. I think the risk of complaints would be pretty high if we spent $3.7 million more just going for the bond.
I think your risk of complaints is going to skyrocket if something happens between now and 2028 when it opens and everyone in my neighborhood and everyone else in city water can't use as much water as they want in the summer.
Well, that's true, but the majority of people are on wells. No,
But
just-
the people on wells don't pay for it.
Yeah, the people on wells don't pay for this. The
Oh,
people
they
using the
don't.
water are the only ones. Of the council,
I
I'm
know,
the
I
only one
know.
who will pay for this.
I know, but I'm, 3.7 million is a lot of money.
You're the only one on this council
On city water.
on city water.
Right,
Yes.
I'm
right.
glad we have your perspective.
So the,
And so you want the bond,
Yes.
so we can do this fast.
Yes, because there's no
well, it's
guarantee-
not fast, keep in mind.
faster than the PFA. There's no guarantee we're going to get the PFA. It could not be financed, and then we're just delayed with no savings. The cost of the supplies could go up, which would negate the savings. And if something happens to the Kings Point Tower because we're not repainting it or repairing it until this treatment plant is up, what if something happens to that tower while we're waiting 4 years?
Okay, stop. Basically, this is kind of silly. You're the only one that represents the people that are going to pay for it.
We represent all
We're
the
not
people.
paying for it.
But it doesn't
We
matter,
don't
we're still,
represent them. She does.
well, okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I
We-
get
we
what you
all-
mean.
we all
I get your
represent.
meaning. But the bottom line is, she does.
I
And
understand.
if she really wants to push this, and it's the people that she's representing that want it,
But we as a
But-
city have to justify spending
But-
$3.7 million more.
To everyone else.
It's basically a choice between instant
no, you don't.
gratification and
Stop.
paying more.
You don't. It's the only people you have to justify it
Well,
to
no-
are the people on the water.
Okay,
that are
so-
gonna pay
It's
those
about
rates.
2/3 of the city though, or 60% to 2/3, and it's a lot of.
Hold
people.
on, so what happens, so just so we all know, I tend to kind of agree with Kathleen, even though I'm not on city water. However, we also need to be cognizant and be aware of what happens if the water users can't pay for this. Guess what then happens? then the entire city gets to pay for it. So we have to be careful from that perspective too. Now, a lot of times there's interfund loans or whatever, but we have to be careful and we have to be cognizant of that. And that's maybe where that perspective, your perspective, comes into play. But the other thing I want to point out is the likelihood that we're going to have to bond $19 million is probably not real high. I've heard, I could be wrong, and I'm not going to put money on it, but I've heard that Dean Phillips is usually pretty successful in his requests for bids for projects such as this. So let's, even if we assume, and this is a gamble, I get it, but even if you, and I don't have those numbers, and that would be good to have, but we'd probably be looking at somewhere around 15 to 16%, plus the 19 million, the 19 million also has a pretty steep contingency built into it. So again, a lot of this is going to be flushed out within the next year before we would even go to build it. The design, and Aaron, maybe you could confirm this, as we get the design nailed down, we're going to have better numbers for this. So right now, I don't think we have to make a decision on whether we go PFA. I think once we get closer or finished with the design of it, that's when we have to make this decision. And that's probably not going to happen until the end of the year. January timeframe probably. Let's look at that timeframe again. But I think what staff is doing is giving you a heads up, saying here's the options or possibilities. You need to be prepared to make these decisions, and we need to be prepared to make this decision probably in December, January of coming up.
Yes, that's a great point, if I may. We're trying to get the information out in front of you because this is a huge decision for the community, right? We're talking millions of dollars one way or the other. We will know likely by November, December if we get the congressionally directed spending dollars,
Right.
and what that amount is. So we'll have a little bit more information at that time. Plans and specs, I think A2S is working on getting a task order for those either on the June 3rd or June 17th meeting to get started on those. One of the big things I think that we have questions about is the soil quality on the site. We have to figure that out to kind of start the engineering and start the design. So those things will all be baked into the task order to figure that out. But, really the intent is you don't need to make a decision today. We just want to make sure you get all this information, kind of weigh the options a little bit, and get this in front of you so you got some time to look at it. We really could go to December, but there will be a time in December which you'll have to say, well, do you want to put these plans and specs on a shelf and wait a little bit for the PFA potential or the congressionally directed
It's not
spending?
a little bit. It's literally another year.
it's
It's
another
not
year.
several months.
Sure.
It's a full another year with no progress being made.
Right.
And the other thing is, if we do delay it and do the PFA, that also stops any new developments because we can't approve more developments to keep our housing permits up if we don't get this plant.
Although I should ask Sarah, because I asked that same question. So let's just say PFA is what the council decides, and we don't have enough water. So can we put a moratorium on because of that, or is legally what would our abilities be?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, it is possible to do a moratorium. I know Lake Elmo was kind of having this same issue and with water, and they did put a moratorium on, but then it ran out. So you can only put it on for,
1 year.
a short period of time,
Yeah.
and then it goes away. So that's the issue with that.
Right.
And then you can't they wanted to put it back on then, and I said, no, one time is enough, and you have the one chance, and that's
Right.
all you get. So that's the other issue.
Right.
They did put together a premature development ordinance, which talks about if there isn't enough city water supply, and then there's other things in there too that are listed, they can deny a plat. So they do have that tool. They haven't used it recently, but it is an option for them. But they keep moving forward with approving
the problem,
development
yeah,
without no water.
problem with the moratorium, or even not approving, as you know, we need more people on our water system. So it's counterproductive, so to speak, to do a moratorium. Because if we did a moratorium for, let's say, a year, look at how that's going to affect our planning department, and we have over $700,000 a year that we bring in because of our new home construction permits. I think the number is around 650, 750. Okay, and now all of a sudden you do a moratorium, that money goes away, or a lot of it goes away. Not all of it, but a lot of it goes away. So that's another factor to consider. And then what do you do with your employees? We have building officials. That's another whole issue. So quite honestly, the $3.7 million, and that number is going to come down. It isn't going to be that big if we decide to hold off and do a PFA. So just keep all of that in mind. There's a lot of other things that we have to consider before we make that decision. And maybe we could bring back, I'd like to see the numbers, I'd like to see the numbers with a, let's say $15 million bond. Then what are we looking at in terms of differential? What is the delta between those two? I think we should, it's going to be less. And then if we had to do a moratorium, what would that look like for revenue stream, and what would that look like for staffing? I think we need to look at that. So we may be better off, because we need those area charges, those WAC charges, and we need the connection charges as well as the use charges.
How does that work with the Woodland Cove, David? If they're doing their final plots there, are we going to get money in for that? And then is that going to? It seems like that's going to be a bigger risk for the water supply as everybody puts in their yards and all that. Have you thought about that in terms of this water issue?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have, yes. So here's,
Well, I
okay.
just like to hear
So,
that.
yeah. Well, so what we've done, as you know, now all of the subdivisions that now, or the phases that come in, and that has happened for a couple of years now, they have to, for irrigation, those homes all have to be connected to the storm water ponds.
Right, I understand.
So that's that. But we have enough capacity to provide all of the homes, and correct me if I'm wrong, to Woodland Cove and the final phases, through the final phase. So we have
Okay,
enough
so that
water
was-
capacity for that.
Yeah, they would
Right.
still be fine.
So that's built into this discussion already.
And Aaron, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, we looked at that as part of the building plan review. I think it was like 10 or 20 gallons a minute of base use that development needed to just use normal in-home water supply. And our team felt like, that's minor, I guess. It was the summer peaking demand that was a concern, but we're mitigating that with the stormwater irrigation.
Right.
Okay.
And then, like Jasper said, you can also implement stage 2 of our water restrictions, which is twice a week versus every other day, which would still be fine for most gardens and grass and stuff like that. It's just, would be another phase. So,
And one of the things that'll help too is that we've talked during the budget process, we'll bring back an updated rates, study type worksheet. We'll probably have David Drown help with that, charge us a few $100 to get an independent source to help, update those numbers. I think a couple of years ago it was 14% rate increases for a few years. Obviously things have, we need to get those updated because the numbers have grown from $10 million plant to 15 or 19 or whatever it is. So, 20, 30% for rate increases for a couple few years shouldn't shock anybody, and it depends on what we choose for financing, and all that's just got to be out there to
right.
the council to decide, and go faster, go slower, and just so everyone's aware of the.
Would you be able to bring those rates back depending on PFA or regular or
Yeah, we can
bonding?
look at, because I think even just internally, we've looked at that PFA versus regular would be like a 8-10% difference in the first, you need like another $180,000, which right now we bring in about 1.7 million, so that's, 10%, or
Yeah,
whatever.
right.
So instead of looking at a 20% increase the first year if you use PFA, it might be a 30% increase, and everyone's got to be fine with that if we choose to go that route, and know that I know we're worried about phone calls on blending water a little bit, but there's phone calls if rates go up too quickly too, so. Either way, I think we're gonna get some phone calls, just Gary gets them, or Renee and me get them, or whoever, so it's sort of a
Right,
horse apiece, I guess, or different challenges for different decisions, so.
right. Aaron, anything else you want to add?
Lots of thoughts, I guess, the timeline question. I put 2.5, again, to be conservative. This is the first schedule that we've really looked at. The biggest driver for that timeline really is electrical equipment. So generators, control panels, DFDs, that just historically over the last 5 years has been a big driver for the extended completion dates.
Okay.
And I just don't know what that's going to look like when we look at this. We've seen those numbers getting better
Yeah,
very recently, but we're all still a little bit gun shy from COVID impacts. So
Right.
I think it's a reasonable time frame. I hope just that we can make it past that.
okay. So you're not looking for a decision tonight. We'll bring back more information, but it's good information to have and a good discussion, initial discussion. So think about it. And then think about your questions that you might have for the next meeting too. Any other questions?
When you bring it back, can you pull the old water rate study we had done? I think it was in 2022, just so we can see those numbers.
Yeah. And can I just recap the timeline? Just, some keystone dates. Like, I don't know if it'll be June 3rd or June 17th, but that'll be when you can evaluate, authorizing A2S to proceed with developing plans and specifications. I'm not sure the timeline on that to get to a substantial place, but, as those develop, as you can imagine, the numbers will get more refined.
Right.
So hopefully, I think we're all hopeful that they all go down and not up.
Right.
So, but December, this December, we should know if we get the congressional funding, and that might be another driver to say, well, we can pursue PFA. Maybe there's a $3 million benefit to that, and then we got $3 million from congressionally directed spending, and that's $6 million. Is that okay? Are you okay with that for the risk? And you just have to be okay with that. And if not, then we have to proceed with the traditional financing piece. So we'll know more. But yeah, again, we just wanted to make sure we're thinking about this and talking to people and trying to get this out as early as we can.
Okay. And I would highly recommend that we increase the area charges and the connection fees substantially.
The area, the connection charges, I think we have some capacity to grow there. I know the area charges, I think we're on the higher.
It's not going to do any good if we have a moratorium.
Exactly. That's my point exactly. David usually doesn't say much, but when he does,
And we are doing staff is doing a survey of area charges and
Okay,
connection
good.
fees
Yes.
just to see where we're at. So
Right.
we're in the process of doing
Okay.
that right now.
And that's good point. All right, thank you, David. So now we're going to talk about upsizing the project.
Yes, I can just, it's fairly self-explanatory through the memo, and there is now a slide that shows the area that this is going to be in. I think that was omitted originally from the packet, so we apologize for that. But in order to put the treatment plant where it is, we need to do some upsizing of the utilities. The ideal time to do that would have been when the pipes went in the ground initially. One question I got from Councilmember Refkin was, the areas that we have on this map, were they put in recently in the last year since we've been talking about this, or
Can you put, is the map up there?
Oh, I think it's in the packet. We can throw it on mine if you want.
I didn't see it in the work session packet.
I had Ally email it.
For some reason, it's not showing
I
up.
just,
Yeah, we can try that. But there's an estimated cost of doing this of, let's see if my computer works. There we go. I mean, it's kind of hard to see, but of about $750,000 to get this done. And this is necessary in order to convey that water from the new treatment plant
Right.
to our system.
Your system, right. Yeah.
It's I'd say unconventional to have a 12-inch main run in parallel with an existing 8-inch main, but in order to replace the 8-inch main completely, you'd have to have all new service connections, and that is problematic to reconnect all of those. So what we're proposing with this, and this will be another future task order, and then authorize plans and specs and bidding because of the cost of this. And we'll develop better cost numbers too as plans and specs are developed too. So I'm not sure, Gary, if you know when those mains were put in.
I'm trying to think, that had to be probably 2 years ago, if not, yeah, probably about 2 years ago that everything went in, the infrastructure, I would say, roughly in there. I mean,
So kind of
this wasn't thought of because the water treatment plant was gonna go by the new tower.
Right.
I mean, that was
Right.
the whole thing. So, I mean, we ended up, hey, there's no aquifer, great, so we had to move it, and that's why we're here. So, we did work with their engineers at JR Hill, and we have upsized all the piping already going in phase 11 to 12-inch to get us up to this point. So
Right.
that's good news. The only reason, I mean, Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, 16-inch would be better, but we only have a 12-inch running down Woodland Cove Boulevard. That's where we're gonna then, that's our main trunk line through there, so we're gonna have to tie into that. So
So you
12
can't,
inches.
12 inches. You're not going to go 16 down to 12. Right.
So this is really just a heads up because this is something new that we haven't really talked about. We talked about it, but
We
not.
talked about it. I mean, we've kind of known that we have to do this.
Yeah, but we have some new numbers. But in the future, you're going to see a council agenda item for this. I just didn't want it to be a surprise and be like, oh, we're doing this now too, and now we have to also pay for this. So
And then just one real quick question. How much money or how much cash do we have that we could put into all of this? Okay, Brian, we do have.
Not if we want our water fund balance to be positive and like some of our neighbors.
Well, I'm not saying we're going to deplete the fund balance. I'm just saying maybe when you bring this back, you can also give us a realistic number in terms of what we could expect to be using cash-wise. I don't know.
I think this would be better I think Gary's got the note in there to wrap this in to bond this with the wells. I mean, it's a large enough chunk where I think right now our water fund's at 1.7, 1.8, and that would spend it down to $1 million, and we basically already have about $1 million of annual expenditure and almost $1 million of debt payments, which we're going to be adding to at some point. That you want to keep, at least around a 1-to-1 ratio of fund balance on hand, at least in enterprise funds. You wouldn't want to go. $1 million would be too low if you'd want to try to pay cash for this. I guess what I'm saying. I'd like to keep it at $1.5 million.
Okay, so
closer to
maybe
2 million.
300 or whatever. I'm just asking. I'm just saying,
I
is
would
that?
almost recommend if there's ever like a small water main fix, sometimes there's something that comes up 50, 100,000. That's where you spend the cash on. If it's something bigger like this, just bond for the whole amount.
No, I was talking about the whole project. If the whole project is 19 million, how much cash are we going to put into it? I don't know.
Yeah, I would say we just want to.
We just bond for it? Okay.
And spread it over 20 years. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Any other questions? All right, thank you. So then we'll move on to the next one. Is that the boat launch?
it's the ordinance
I'm sorry.
amending city code.
I can do that one, since
Okay.
I am the mic. We received an inquiry a few months ago from a resident pointing out that our current city code language doesn't quite align with state statute as far as absentee ballot board. So city attorney Sensala drafted an amendment to city code to reference state statute is to cover any future changes that the state would make. So this will not impact how we administer absentee voting, just clarifying the code language. So it is here for discussion. Otherwise, we have it on a business item tonight. Are there any questions?
Should be pretty
Pretty
straightforward.
It is, yes.
So do we even want to well, it's already on the business item, I was going to say, okay.
We
putting
move
on-
it to consent.
Yeah,
So, just point of clarification, any ordinances I've been putting on business, because I've been directed that way from a couple of council members. So, that's why it's there, even though we talked about it at work session.
all right.
That's okay. We like easy business items too.
Sure.
All right, next we have the tuxedo boat launch dock discussion. Gary?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Council, I've had a few residents in the past ask, and I've had more than ever this year. I've actually had 5 different residents call and ask if we can get a boat, a dock out of the boat launch. And talking to David, don't know why one was ever put out there. We don't know why, but looking at it, doing some pricing, rolling docks are hard to find. Everybody wants permanent docks. I did get a Nickum dock. Actually not Nickum, the new one that's in town. I can't think of it. Sunny.
Oh, Tonka?
Anchor.
I can't remember who they are, but they gave us the one for Anchor Dock here out of Annandale. They do have them. They only carry aluminum, which I don't know if they'll be strong enough for what we want. I mean, the Mincor one that we have presently at the Halstead Dock we bought that in 2012, and that thing is built tough. I mean, it's really holds up well. I think since I've been here, we've only put a few minor repairs on it, so it's a really good built dock. I would definitely spend the extra money and go with that one with the galvanized steel frame, wood planking, and that type of stuff if we're going to do it. So I know that it's a little bit pricey, but I think this will be at least a 20-year investment, if not more. I mean, we're pushing 13 years on 12 years, almost 13 years on the other ones, so I think they'll be around quite a while. So.
Yeah. And so, Gary, you had said, getting it next year. You know what? Get it this year. I mean, that's my opinion, because we're going to be taking it out of the Park Dedication Fund anyway, and we have funds in there. So whether we take it out this year or next year, why not just do it this year?
It's your decision. Yeah, I'm fine with that. So
So the 5 residents, I'm assuming, who want this all live in that area?
yes.
Are they
Yep.
aware that if we put a dock in there, more people will come use that boat launch then?
It is fairly busy already.
It is
There's
already,
very minimal
yeah.
parking, but there's a lot of people that use
Yeah,
that
I don't
area.
live there, and I've used it, and it's really bad because it's kind of a tight area. There's not a lot of parking, but even the water is a problem too. So you get your boat out there, and then it's like,
Well, no, where do you-
got to hold that?
Yeah,
while,
yeah.
Keep it up from the rocks. There's no sandy kind of thing.
Right.
So I think it would really be a good thing to have. It would speed up people being able to get in and out.
Yeah, well, and also just be easier. Well, you could pull your boat over to the side of on the other side of the dock,
Right.
and somebody else could be coming in or going out.
Yeah, and you can't do that now.
Right, you can't do that now,
Yeah,
right?
So it would really speed things up.
Yeah, I just, again, if we're going to do this, then you might as well do it this year, because get it in, do it.
Do I need to bring something back next time, or just order? Go ahead and do it, or
We'll bring something back on the 3rd, just to
just to make
document it.
We'll put the order in because.
I'll put it in then. And,
Yeah,
then
because,
we'll bring something back
yeah.
official for you.
right,
Okay.
yeah. You all okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
just if the 5 residents that want it start complaining about the increased traffic, please remind them they asked for it.
Construction parking ordinance discussion.
Yes, I can take this, Madam Mayor, members of council. This has been an ongoing discussion. So at previous work session, we talked about this is about hard scrabble road and some of the complaints we've received about construction parking in that area. One of the direction we received from council at the work session was to bring back an ordinance that kind of addressed the issues that we have, to try to maneuver something that maybe we had a little bit more control over construction parking in the future. Now, this doesn't address the current complaints that we've received at hard scrabble, but it would in the future create an avenue to have that conversation with somebody taking out a building permit or somebody doing a lot split. Some of the basic terms of the ordinance could be, and these are just suggested, that planned unit developments will be exempt from this ordinance, as parking considerations can be negotiated or described within the development agreement. So that would, I know there's some concerns about Woodland Cove and how tight it is, and the parking in there being maybe different than Hardscrabble. If that's something you want to do, you can put that in the ordinance. Construction, including renovation parking, will occur on site unless the property owner or representative can demonstrate a hardship. So that hardship would be something like topography, wetlands, trees, or other features that make it difficult to actually park on the site. Staff would want to keep the staff having discretion so that every building permit doesn't go to city council where there's a question of where people are going to park. If off-site parking is required, staff would determine if an escrow is appropriate. So in Hardscrabble, there's an escrow. I believe it's $25,000 that we've received for that project in case there's some road damages. I know there were concerns of Hardscrabble just being resurfaced, and then some large equipment being on there. So we have that. If it's determined that an escrow is appropriate, staff would determine that, make the recommendation to council. Council would have to approve the escrow. If no escrow is determined, the builder they're still responsible for any right-of-way damage per other ordinances. So those are some basic terms that I kind of took away from our work session. Now there will be some challenges administratively. That's the biggest challenge with any ordinance or any code, is the actual enforcement of it if there are issues. So right now the current strategy is complaint based. So if we would pass an ordinance, there would have to be a complaint, or an officer or whatever would have to be driving by there and notice that somebody's parking and then make contact with that person. So just keep that in mind when if you would pursue an ordinance. Enforcement is a challenge. That's all I have on this. Looking for direction. Sarah's kind of ready, or our city attorney is ready to develop an ordinance. I think there's maybe some basic framework that we can use from other cities, but this is somewhat new, I think. There isn't much out there that does this that I believe we can find. So I'll take any direction.
Questions?
I just don't like the comment, it's hard to enforce an ordinance, because then why have an ordinance? It has to be enforced. I mean, why have it if you're not going to enforce it?
I don't think we need it.
So I think it would be better, we would be better served if we would address, there's several situations, and staff has been dealing with, so there's a situation in Woodland Cove with construction parking, and I've gotten calls, I've gotten complaints, and there's a lot of complaints. And we've gotten a lot of complaints regarding this Hardscrabble issue as well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think rather than saying we're going to do an ordinance citywide, I think we could have a policy that when a building permit comes in, we ask about the parking, number one. Mm-hmm. And explain in certain circumstances that you should be, and they have to spell it out. But that could be a policy, that could be just something. But I think the bigger issue is on Hardscrabble and in Woodland Cove. And what I want to do is eliminate staff time that is dealing with this, because it's difficult. So on Hardscrabble, I think if we just said no parking, or we had one 500-600 foot area on Hardscrabble that's parking, everything else is no parking, that might solve the issue. In Woodland Cove, and this is what happens, and I've been out to both places numerous times, and what happens is you have a dumpster on one side, then you have utility vehicles working on the other side, and then you have construction vehicles on both sides. And I have a small car, and I was on Woodland Cove Boulevard, which is the wider street, and I had a hard time getting through. They didn't like me. I actually got out and told them to move their vehicles. But anyhow, so here's the thing. I think in Woodland Cove, everything, at least we should be putting up temporary no parking signs on one side when building is happening. Because what they were doing is they have the dumpster over here, and then they have the vehicles over here. So I think when a building permit comes in for a house or a unit, we need to tell them everything on the side where it's being built. And put at least temporary no parking signs up across the street so that everything has to be on one side. That'll alleviate a lot of the issue. There was one area on Wolfberry, it was like squeezing my little car through there. So that could be avoided. And like I said, if we just put permanent no parking signs, maybe with a small area on Hardscrabble where they can park, everything else is no parking, our staff would probably be very happy. Police could enforce this. The problem right now is it's so hard to enforce these parking issues and these situations because there is parking allowed. And if a bigger vehicle can get through, they can't really go out and ticket people. So I think we could eliminate that and they could actually do the enforcement.
Well, not to say anything bad about your officers, but on my street, there is no parking on one side of the street, and people park on it all the time. And these are residents. These aren't workers. These are residents. And I weave through the cars and move on because it's not worth their time to come out and ticket them. So it's still going to be an enforcement issue and a complaint issue. Dumpsters shouldn't be on the street, and if it's the one that was there Friday, we called the police station and the HOA and got it moved off the street very quickly.
But if there is a complaint and there are no parking signs, they can enforce it. If there's a complaint and there are no parking signs, they can't enforce it. So there's a difference there.
Madam Mayor and Council, I just want to clarify that. Certainly, it helps to have no parking signs in some cases. If we get to a location where they're blocking the road and we can't get emergency vehicles through, we can still enforce that. We don't need a no parking sign for that. The challenge with making one side of the street no parking, that works great in areas where houses are far enough apart. But when you're in areas where they're building cottage homes on both sides of the road, they're not going to be able to park anywhere. Then we're literally going to force them out of that area onto somebody else's street because there's construction so close together on both sides of the street.
But if we do temporary no parking signs, and so it's on a unit by unit basis, then we could address that situation.
That's a possibility. I just want to be clear about the expectation here. And first of all, to be very clear, Hardscrabble and Woodland Cove are apples and coconuts. The problems are not the same. As far as I'm concerned, the problem on Hardscrabble is not. It's one person's displeasure with the situation, is what it is. It's not a public safety hazard. It's not a concern whatsoever to me. I've been out there a million times. Our staff has worked very closely with the construction folks. They've been nothing but cordial. And yes, they have a job to do. It's a challenging location. I get that. But it's small enough where there's even another way in and out. So for the most part, that isn't a huge concern to me. Woodland Cove's a completely different animal. And we do go through there as a result of that. We're through there every single day. And we self-police a lot of that stuff. Staff just goes out. They don't wait necessarily for a complaint because there's a lot of construction on a daily basis. So we're out there managing that. Even without issuing citations, we're managing that very routinely. So I certainly understand the temporary no parking signs. We just have to be careful about how I don't want to create a situation where Street A is the construction zone, but now we're forcing them onto some street that is already done, and now those folks have to deal with it because we made the problem worse. Right. So it's a little more complicated in Woodland Cove just because of all the different types of housing and things going in there.
So on Hardscrabble, that was a huge lot. Was it that it was wet, or why couldn't all those vehicles park on that lot?
Well, that's a great question. So the bottom line is that lot they built two houses where there was one. So there was a lot of work going on in there. So you just couldn't get construction vehicles in there. When you're doing grading, cement work, these are big vehicles. For the most part, those construction companies did a really good job of trying to keep all of that stuff in front of or near the construction zone.
My experience when I went out there. And then the other issue is, you talk to the builder, and then maybe for a few days they comply, and then they're right back to what they were doing before too. So there's that, but
There is. I think
yeah.
part of the problem is if the reason it's a parking zone is because it's wide enough to get vehicles through. And we've instructed the complainant in this case, when you see something that you think, okay, that's getting a little narrow, probably can't get an ambulance through there, call us. And so what would happen is he would initially call us, and then he stopped because he didn't like the answer he got. We'd ask people to move, they would, or we'd say, okay, we can clearly get through here. I understand you're not happy with it, but nonetheless, they can get through there. So then he just stopped calling us because he didn't like the answer.
Well, one of the other issues, and this isn't just hardscrabble, is when these big trucks come and then they offload on our street,
Right.
These huge heavy equipment or, rocks and gravel and stuff like
That
that.
happens everywhere.
That
I
happens
know,
with
I know.
residents since, like, Superior dumped a whole bunch of rock on Woodland Cove Parkway 2 weeks ago.
Right. That's
And
a whole different
And
issue.
that's technically enforceable through a state ordinance. There is
Right.
no dumping in the right of way.
Right.
I mean, but they don't. They won't put it in the people's driveways. I mean, I don't know how many times I've called the CSOs to come out and talk to them, get them moved, but that's what wrecks the roads more than these cars parking on them, is these loads being dumped on them.
Right. That's a whole different issue. I'm
Yep.
all in favor of whatever the city
Yep.
can do to avoid that. As far as vehicles offloading, maybe other vehicles or things like that, as long as the driver is right there, that's not parking. That's just unloading something. As long as if there's an emergency, they're going to move that thing because they're standing right there. And sometimes that gets called in as a parking complaint. I don't like that. They're blocking the road. Well, that happens everywhere. When people are moving, they're blocking the road for a few seconds while they're maneuvering equipment and things like that. So, but anyway, that's
Right,
that's-
and offloading is different, it's just, but the damage it still does to our roads, especially
Right.
on hot summer days, and they're, that's an issue, I mean.
Madam Mayor, a quick question just to clarify. When you say temporary no parking signs, are you saying that the city would just put up regular no parking signs in that area, or are we talking about developers putting up paper, like wooden stake type signs?
No, I
or-
think it has to be by the city, so it's
Right.
enforceable.
Correct, okay.
Right.
So to that, there was a complaint on the neighborhood Facebook page just this week. Someone who lives in the neighborhood got a ticket for parking where it says no parking and was furious. So the cops, the police do not know the difference between a construction worker's vehicle and a resident's vehicle. So if they just start going through and ticketing everyone who's parking where there's no parking, the complaints from residents will skyrocket.
But if it says
if
no
it's no
parking,
parking,
I'm not
they should
disputing-
get a ticket.
I'm not disputing that they
Don't
shouldn't
care.
be parking there. I'm just letting you know when the complaints start rolling in to chief and staff, like, this will be why. Again, it happens on my street. I just move past and
A lot of
Get
Woodland
annoyed.
Cove is already no
Too bad.
parking on one
Yeah.
side. The developer went through, I believe, 2 or 3 years ago and installed all kinds of signs on one side of the road, almost throughout the entire development, because it is narrow roads and it makes it tough. If there's 2 cars parked on the street, you're not getting through even with a car. So that's why they did that. So I mean, that's already been taken care of out there. That's not, that's not a big issue out there.
Right.
And the same thing happened out, and I'll say when on, I don't know how many years ago it was, but the ones on, there was a couple houses on 44. One of them across from Maple Forest was doing a remodel, and they parked up Maple Forest all the way to Stonebridge Lane. I mean, it happens all over. There's no place for these people to park. I mean, you can't put on the property. I mean, you just can tell builders, hey, one person a day. I mean, it's for the. I mean, I'll be honest. The person that's complained did the same thing when they built their house.
Exactly.
I'll put it out there. I'll put it out there. They did the exact same thing.
It's on the aerial. I got the aerial up. You
Yeah.
can see it.
okay. Council,
I don't think we need an ordinance. We want staff or the officers to go through and start ticketing everyone parked in no parking zones, fine, but there will be lots of complaints from residents, not just the construction workers.
Well, send them a note saying they're going to start getting ticketed if they park in no parking zones.
right.
And I like the idea of policy. I like a policy. Here's your policy. Don't do this. I live on a Loring Drive is not really wide, and these big trucks will come and they'll park directly across from my driveway. I have to do like a 5-corner turn to get on my driveway. Just don't park directly across from someone's driveway. It'd be nice. I like the idea of a policy.
a side note, for the parking tickets, do we get the income from that, or does that go to somewhere else?
Mayor and council, we would get a portion of that. I don't know what it is exactly, but
Small portion.
it's a small portion.
Dang. Well, then I don't get the ticket.
Okay. Any other comments?
I like the idea of the temporary no parking. See if that works, and if it doesn't, then we'll go from there.
Okay. So we'll kind of do, so any other discussion regarding hardscrabble? I don't think you're going to have a very happy individual.
Well, we put the no parking on the one side, so you should be able to still get through. I think when we approve a home to be built, we're approving them to park reasonably to build that home.
Okay.
Aren't they just about done that project anyway?
There's another home for sale.
There's probably
It's worried about
another-
happening again.
Oh.
It's probably another year maybe, and then there's another lot for sale, or another home that's for sale that might be torn down and also done, rebuilt or subdivided. I mean, that's a whole nother issue. So, I just think if we can make a resident happy by doing something reasonable, why not? And if we do permanent no parking on one side or have some kind of area where they can park, when you look at all of hardscrabble, there's got to be an area that you could allow parking, especially for, and really the only parking on hardscrabble is construction parking. People don't, residents don't park on hardscrabble. Because they're
All
driving.
contractors do, daily.
Right.
Yeah,
But
the
where
mowers and-
do you want them to park? Like, where would you put the construction traffic? Because they can't park on the property when they're excavating and digging up and doing all of that. They can't park on the property. So where would you put
These
them?
are huge lots. I don't understand how they can.
You could, they could park all along the, by the wetland there. They could park all along
So-
there.
There's not a lot of room through there, though.
That's pretty.
It's the
skinny.
same.
There's no shoulder area, where they park has the most shoulder room. There's not a lot of shoulder room in there to park a vehicle. If you do, then you start really narrowing down the road. Where they're parking is the best spot, because it is the widest. There's rock shoulder, and that's honestly the best spot they could park.
Yeah, they have picked the most reasonable spot they can possibly park. I realize this problem's probably going to happen again,
It's going to happen
but you
again,
can
right?
see the tree cover, Mayor and Council, on all of these lots. I mean, that's a challenge in and of itself. This doesn't show topography. Most of these lots are heavily slanted towards the lake. So there's all kinds of challenges with getting vehicles in and out of there, especially in the spring if it's wet.
You can't park on the home side because it's all, like you said, sloped, and it's, all landscaped.
It's
and the
landscaped,
only
right.
spot you can do is in the inner area of the nature conservatory.
And the only other option would be allow parking on the inner side, not on the outer side.
Yeah, that's what it is now, right now, through that area.
Well, through there, yeah.
Yeah.
That would be the only option.
I'm all for making a resident happy, but he's not going to get what he wants. We're not going to say they can't park anywhere on hardscrabble. Like, it's his request is not something that we can do. When we approve them to build the home, they have to be able to park their workers somewhere. And
Right.
I mean, some of these guys are carrying stuff. They're not going to walk, half a mile to the site carrying whatever they're carrying.
No, but they could drive over there,
Dump it.
drop it off, and then park. They could, there's different ways of doing it too, but, yeah, like I said, if there was a section that they could park and that, otherwise you're gonna, like I said, you're gonna end up with that same situation on other lots on hardscrabble, because they're gonna be subdivided or, new homes being built. So, just trying to avoid more staff time and headaches and, yeah.
Madam Mayor and Council, to my knowledge, at least on our side, there's not been a single complaint from anyone other than the one individual.
Yeah.
Which, in my mind, I feel for him. I understand this is upsetting to him, but that, to me, tells me that nobody else has a problem with this but him. And there are other, I realize it's close to him, but there are other residents in that vicinity as well that haven't said a word.
Well, the one resident next to the two that are being built, that's the one, the elderly couple, might be on the market soon. That's my understanding.
Okay.
And then there's the gentleman that's been complaining, and then he owns the other one next to him as well. So then the closest one that could potentially be a complainant is further away from the construction zone and the construction parking.
Sure.
It's probably 1,000 feet or more.
Okay.
So just kind of,
But they all drive on the road.
right,
And
right.
there's no good scenario unless we're going to pave a big area somewhere where construction workers can park, which I don't think anyone wants to do. There's no good scenario. There's nothing we can do that's going to make him happy, other than saying they can't park anywhere. But then if we do a no parking anywhere, that includes your lawn crews, everyone, like you people doing all your yard maintenance, and
Right.
if you put gutters in or anything that you want to do on your home, they can't park there either
So
anymore.
you said landscape.
Right, and that occurs on a daily basis in this neighborhood because, again, those driveways are very, very narrow. I'm all for trying to come up with a solution to this. I just don't think the solution for Hardscrabble is the same solution for Woodland Cove. I think we kind of have to dissect those. If we're having issues in these two different places, we have to look at those things differently because it's very different, that's all.
All right. Okay. So if you can think of another solution, please let us know.
What does the homeowner that's complaining want them to do?
No parking anywhere on Hardscrabble.
Well, I think primarily no parking within a reasonable distance of his property, I think. Yeah. Yeah, right.
But you said,
But
you
it's
did the
also-
same thing.
Yeah.
Why doesn't someone just show them pictures, say, you did the same thing?
All right, so let's move on to the next one, and that is the council chambers Hunter's Crest 5th edition Outlaw D discussion.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'll make this brief. This is just an update from a developer that met with David and I don't know, probably 3 weeks ago now, about a sewer line that crosses Outlot D in Hunter's Crest. I'll pull that up real quick so you can see it. So it's this sewer line that goes across here. There isn't drainage and utility easement that was recorded. I believe this was about 18 years ago when this was platted. The developer has requested, kind of more like demanded, that we move it. We've had a legal opinion recently reviewed. I believe it was originally developed in 2018 and then reaffirmed here in 2024 that we have prescriptive easement rights in this area.
It was reviewed in 2018.
Well, that was when I think initially it was looked at by legal counsel. Right. And then more recently, 2024, reviewed and reaffirmed that our opinion is that we have a prescriptive easement right on this. The idea with this whole area was that 9,300 you can see on here, if that parcel would sell, there'd be a few, as you can imagine, road connections in that area. That line would then be moved, and then that would no longer be going across that outlot. So I'm not sure 18 years ago the idea was that was going to happen quicker than it did. It obviously hasn't happened yet, but that would be the driver, in our opinion, that the developer would then move that line. So we wanted to just let you know that that's our strategy with this, is to continue to have that prescriptive easement right declared for this sewer line. There may or may not be anything in the future with this. But I wanted to make sure everybody's aware so that if there is something in the future, it's not the first you hear about it.
Why do they want it moved?
Well, it's kind of an idea that we would use our ability to use eminent domain to take some of the land, then sell it back to them. We would move the line, put the road in, and then they would build some lots. That was kind of what was pitched, which isn't something that...
We've never done that before.
Yeah.
And and an imminent domain may be a hard sell because there's already a prescriptive easement over the property.
Correct, yeah, so we're just reasserting our prescriptive easement right in the area.
What does prescriptive mean?
So it means that we have like a public utility in an area for, I think, well, Sarah can probably describe, there's a certain
15
time threshold.
15 years.
15 years.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, members of the council, it works kind of the same way if you've heard of adverse possession. So basically, if you're occupying a property for 15 years, it becomes yours.
Wow.
Unless it's Torrance property. You can't adversely possess Torrance property. This property is not Torrance. It's abstract property. So that makes it a little bit easier here. But the city has had that line in there for more than 15 years. So there's a similar line of legal reasoning that if you're an easement in 15 years, similar to adverse possession, you have that prescriptive easement. Instead of adverse possession, you have prescriptive easement over the property. The easement has to be open and obvious, so that means they have to be aware of it. In this case, there is a manhole on the property. So I think it's pretty obvious that there's something there. It's not like they didn't know about it because there's nothing there. So, and it's definitely been well over 15 years. So we think that the city could prove that it has a prescriptive easement. And like the mayor is saying, I mean, if they ask us to move it, I mean, we're just going to condemn the property and, keep the easement there and probably assess them for the cost of the line. So it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to do anything with the line by moving it or, compensating them for it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Good. All right. Hearing none, then we'll move on to council chambers IT equipment.
All right, I'll make this real quick. So as you know, this is kind of an ongoing discussion about how our AV equipment here has been failing. Recently, we had to replace an audio board because of a power surge, along with a few other things at the police department. But this is related to the AV equipment. It's going to fail. I mean, we're kind of at end of life. We've gotten some quotes for some replacement costs of in kind what we have here. Roughly $60,000. The feedback we got from city council was that's too much for the 30 to 40 viewers per
year.
Well, yeah.
per council meeting.
Per council meeting.
Per council meting.
So what we've kind of come up with, we have to replace it with something and start planning. What I'm requesting is, kind of a budget of $15,000, not to exceed, to kind of develop something here. It won't be the same. It'll be different. We're going to try to, be crafty with it and do the best we can. It won't be a long-term, it'll probably be a 5-year solution is what we would say is good. This one is 8 years old, so it's not much older than what I would say something that, or 10, is it 10? So it's near 10. 2014, okay, so it's near 10. 10 years, we'll just say. So about half that, but I had a vendor come in and tell them kind of our budget, and I haven't received any follow-up from them. So, I think we're going to have to kind of go at it alone and figure it out. So I'm just requesting authorization for a budget not to exceed $15,000 to look at replacing what we have. The idea would be we could do a little redundancy between our current system, which we just got up and running again here probably an hour ago, 2 hours ago. And then we can have a little redundancy throughout the summer and maybe the fall, if we're okay with it, make the switch. And we would use cable fund dollars to do this.
Right, okay. So, you're not giving me a really great sense of confidence that you know exactly what to do.
So I think I sent out a survey a little while ago and kind of maybe sent a link of what I did in my previous city. It uses like GoToWebinar, which I think if you were here during COVID, you're familiar with using GoToMeeting. Similar, there'd be a series of maybe 2 or 3 cameras throughout here that, you could choose and look at different views of the city council, something like that. I've done it in the past. It worked, still working right now. And that was 2021. So we're going on 3 years. So
from a tech standpoint, I would concurrently say he was gonna figure it out, it's gonna be Jasper.
Yeah. And we'll see, I think we'll be able to get it figured out. It's just, you have to be okay with maybe a little bit different style of a council meeting. It won't look the same, but it'll be just as effective. And if at some point we get more viewers and we want to spend more money, we definitely can. This is kind of, I'd call it a stopgap. Call it a low cost, but it's still expensive.
I think it's $10,000 more than it needs to be. I really think you can do it for $5,000. I know you can do it for $5,000.
Well, what about this? So let me ask you this, Jasper. So you're going to look into this and you're going to bring back options to the council then?
If you'd like, if you'd want me to do that, I could do that. One thing that that I would have is a monitor that would be able to have, like, say, Sarah be on there. And so she doesn't have to drive an hour 2 ways, right? She could just be at home and attend our meetings. So there, there's some monitor, there's some AV stuff. So it's not just like one camera or something like that. It's a little bit more elaborate with that. Getting the microphones to all sync up, be a couple computers, involved with it too. So I think it'll probably be around 10. 15 is a little contingency if I need to get somebody to consult with,
Did you talk to the person I told you to talk to?
I did.
And what was wrong with that?
So that system, so I think the church is just the camera with that just live streams that has audio into it. That doesn't necessarily, with the survey that we sent out, allow for us to do kind of interactive meetings with staff. That's the main difference.
Is it one camera?
So this isn't just city council meetings. This is other interactive meetings with staff?
So like if
He wants to be able to remote in.
yeah, so let's
I thought
say
we can't go do remote meetings.
No, yes, we can't, but the staff can.
so like if Sarah wanted to do a city council meeting remotely,
Do we save money when Sarah doesn't drive here?
I believe so. I mean, I don't know if that's part of our
It's all under
retainer.
the retainer.
It's retainer.
But I will say,
Don't care.
there are certain implications for the council too. I mean, if you're out of town or whatever, you would be able to attend the meeting remotely as long as we can see and hear
You just can't vote. Or
No, you can
No, you
vote.
can vote.
We can see and hear you, and you can see and hear the council and the
Right.
public.
Right.
so you just have to sit in a Starbucks or something?
You have to sit somewhere that's available to the public, and we have to identify your location, and that's usually the kicker, because people are like, well, I don't want them to know where I am. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
Right.
I'll just bow out of this, but, it is.
But
an
has
option
that
we've done.
changed, or did they change? I know that there was talk at the legislature this year to change that, to make it a little more easy, but that didn't happen.
No, there's another caveat in there. If you're sick or whatever, you can have a doctor say that you can't be in a public place, and then you don't have to disclose your location.
Okay.
And then there's also for military personnel as well. If they're deployed, they can participate, and they don't have to disclose their location for obvious reasons.
Okay.
So there are some exceptions to not disclosing the location, but for most people, you have to disclose your location. That's usually what people don't like, and then they
Right.
just say, never mind. But it does, a lot of cities do allow it on a pretty frequent basis.
I was gonna say, we've had here recently with some of our development applications, because it is more common, they've asked us if
Yeah.
there's that option. This recent sketch plan, they're from Colorado, as you know.
Right.
And there was somewhat of a conflict, and I know if that were available, they would have used it, not that that's the end all
Right.
be all, but just, it has been asked of planning staff here recently.
Yeah, I could see it working for staffing issues or, staff meetings or whatever, more so than council meetings, although it would be nice if we could have it available for council meetings for staff. So
And-
Sarah or,
Yeah.
yeah.
One of the other things is that this projector you can no longer get bulbs for, so if it goes out, we would have to replace the projector. Those are also expensive. So it's kind of a lot of different IT, AV type hardware. So it's not just a camera.
So, do we have the money in the media, in the cable fund?
We got like 40,000 left in there after we get out of the broadband stuff, obviously, but
Okay.
yeah, it's probably, this would take probably a third of it or so.
Okay, so 10 to 15
So where's the 15,000 coming from?
from the cable fund.
From the cable fund, and we have it,
Right now, yeah.
right now.
It's gonna run out at some point, because franchise fees
nothing
keep
coming
going
in
down.
Well, if you have it, then I would say bring back a plan.
Okay, so try and stick that 10, 15,000.
Well, if I can have a meeting somewhere else, might be worth it.
All right.
All right, bring it back.
That concludes, so we have 15 minutes before our meeting starts, and if you're hungry, you can go back there. So a motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
Thank you, Kathleen. Is there a second?
Second.
Yes.
Thank you. Claudia made that second. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 5-0.